This episode is brought to you by Redfin. You're listening to a podcast, which means you're probably multitasking. Maybe even scrolling home listings on Redfin, saving homes without expecting to get them. But Redfin isn't just built for endless browsing. It's built to help you find and own a home. With agents who close twice as many deals, when you find the one, you've got a real shot at getting it. Get started at redfin.com. Own the dream.
Get in the game with the college-branded Venmo debit card. Wreck your team with every tap and earn up to 5% cash back with Venmo Stash, a new rewards program from Venmo. No monthly fee, no minimum balance, just school pride and spending power. Get in the game and sign up for the Venmo debit card at venmo.com/collegecard. The Venmo MasterCard is issued by the Bancorp Bank N.A. Select schools available. Venmo Stash terms and exclusions apply at venmo.me/stash terms. Max $100 cash back per month.
For the News and Observer, I'm Dawn Vaughan, Capitol Bureau Chief and host of Under the Dome. Today, I'm joined by my politics team colleague, Danielle Battaglia, our DC correspondent. And as we record this on Monday, December 15th, this is the last week of candidate filing. I'm sure there will be a few more surprises to come. A lot has been going on in the congressional races. Primarily, all of the focus and attention around incumbent Democrat Dawn Davis in Eastern North Carolina. Danielle, let's start with him and that race and the latest on all of this.
Yeah, so this one's an interesting race to watch because, as everybody should know by now, we redistricted North Carolina for, I think, this 5th time in 6 years. And this one specifically targeted Representative Dawn Davis, but also his district and Congressman Greg Murphy's district. So these are our two far east districts. And basically it left Davis trying to figure out where he's going to run at because they put his home in District 3, but he's always represented District 1. And also District 1 is a lot of the counties that have always been part of District 1 or part of his area in like all of his jobs. And so he had to weigh, do I run against Greg Murphy and be now an opponent to an incumbent, or do I stay the incumbent, but my home's in a different area? So he has announced that he's running in District 1. He's going to move his home out of, I always forget if he lives in Snow Hill or Snow Camp and why I can't remember which is which. Snow Hill, Snow Camp's in the triad. So he had to decide whether to move out of Snow Hill, where he was the youngest mayor. So he's got history here. I think he became the mayor of Snow Hill at 29. And so he's moving from there somewhere into District 1. And he is up against a lot of Republicans. There's a huge chunk of Republicans that have chosen to run over there. And I'm hearing more could come out of the woodwork before this week ends. So it's a race to watch very closely.
So as we're recording this on, midday, Monday, the 15th, you said he hasn't filed yet.
I have not seen him filing. I thought he had announced he filed, but I looked at the list this morning and his name's not in it. So I'm not exactly sure. Congress is hopping, but I would expect him to do it today because after today, we're going to be dealing with all kinds of bills up here trying to wrap up the session. So I don't know when he gets back to District 1.
What are the big bills going on this week up there?
So in the Senate, they're going to look at the National Defense Authorization Act. This is an annual bill that they have to pass to set policy and spending for the Department of Defense. It is, I think, for 65 years, we have been passing this bill annually now. And what's interesting for North Carolina of note in this bill is that oftentimes with these bigger bills that have to move, they'll put policy in that have nothing to do with the bills, but they want to get passed quickly. So this time is the Lumbee Recognition Act for the Lumbee tribe of North Carolina. They've been fighting for over 130 years to get federal recognition with full benefits. And this has been one of Tom Tillis's pet projects. He wants to make sure this passes before he leaves Congress. And so that is one bill we're tackling. I fully expect it to pass the Senate and go to the president's desk for signature. And then also we are looking at the Affordable Care Act subsidies that are expiring and what we can do to make healthcare affordable for Americans, because without these subsidies, we're going to see across the board people's healthcare costs rising, whether you're on the Affordable Care Act or not. And so those are two big issues we're tackling. We're also supposed to get the release of the Epstein files this week. So big week in Washington.
Indeed. Well, for those that there are more people that want to go, and we've got a pretty crowded Republican primary field. So what's the latest that you're hearing as far as who the contenders are, who might be the who might pull it off and be who, Davis is up against in the general?
Yeah, there's a lot of people, especially Republicans, running in District 1. So we're looking at people like Sheriff Asa Buck, who's from that district. We're looking at Eric Rouse, who lives actually in District 3, but he's going to continue running in District 1. I had heard for a while he was President Trump's pick, but now I think there's some up in the air about who's going to get the endorsement. You've got Hannig that's running in it. He's one of our state senators, correct? I always want to make him a representative, but he is a state senator.
He was in the House. He was in the House, and
that's why I get confused.
Yeah, he was so excited about becoming a senator that he got a NC Senate tattoo. Yep.
That's right. I should remember it just from that tattoo alone. And then we had Sandy Roberson running. He is the mayor of Rocky Mount, but he has pulled out this week. There's some controversy in Rocky Mount right now with their budgets, and also both with Bobby Hannig and with Sandy Roberson. Both of them have said some flattering things towards some of the opponents of President Trump when he was running. And so people are wondering how that will affect possibly getting an endorsement there. So you're seeing people like Eric Rouse and Asa Buck moving in to get that endorsement. And I don't know if Trump's going to get involved this week or not. I've heard rumblings of some pushes for that, but Trump's going to Trump, and you never know what the president will do. And so you could see that, and that could change a lot of who gets in, who doesn't get in. Or you could see, him stand back and wait till closer to the primary. And that could also affect people wondering how to maneuver this, knowing that the endorsement's floating out there.
Mm-hmm. Another congressional primary we should talk about is, Democratic incumbent Valerie Foushee is being primaried by Durham County Commissioner NIDA alum. Alum and Foushee ran against each other. Was it last election or two elections?
It might have been 2 ago.
Right, but it was when
they're perennial opponents.
Well, it was when it was an open seat, and Foushee got it. She had a lot of PAC money that helped her win that primary. The primary also included Clay Aiken.
Yep.
And so
there's a faithful listener, I hear, of Dawn's podcast.
So tell me why you think that's one to watch this year. I guess just because it's another popular Democrat in a primarying somebody.
Yeah, I think you actually could speak more to this from your coverage of Durham, but they are opponents that have faced off before. The last time they faced off, and that would have been, I think, 2 cycles ago, they were pretty bitter rivals. And so I think, our congressional races as a whole are fairly boring because of how redistricting has set it up for the incumbents to win and for these districts to be set. But when you have people like NIDA alum coming in, that is something I think people are going to watch. There are 2 women minorities, which always makes it interesting. Women aren't well represented in Congress, and neither are minority groups. And so just that dynamic alone makes it interesting. And I think, either way, when you've got these 2 candidates, they could better represent North Carolina than, your average congressman. And so I think people will be watching it. I think you could see money pumped into these races. And I think both of them are very interesting women to watch.
And the district has changed some. So this is a lot of Durham, also includes some of Wake County too. We just real quickly before the break, I want to start talking about the power of a Trump endorsement, and we'll talk more about that after the break. In this District 1 race, do you think that's enough to have an impact on the primary? So
my talking to people, because Trump is very interesting. He's obviously very dynamic and has a lot to say. Like, you've seen people like Ted Budd and Addison McDowell. Addison McDowell was an absolute nobody in terms of politics. Like, he's got political family members and connections and stuff, but nobody had heard of him. Nobody knew he was going to come into his 6th district race when he ran last cycle. And all of a sudden he says, I'm running, I've got Trump's endorsement, and he becomes number 1 against people like Mark Walker and Bo Hines. So obviously there's some weight there. We saw the same thing with Ted Budd. He was behind Mark Walker again and Governor Pat McCrory, and he gets the Trump endorsement and he suddenly shoots up in popularity. And so I think this Trump endorsement is very interesting this cycle to watch, because Trump's favorability, even in North Carolina, is starting to wane. But at the same time, in those primaries where you've got the people who are watching elections closer than anybody else voting, the Trump endorsement still, people are telling me it's still going to hold a lot of weight. It's the gold standard if you're a Republican to win the election. Although I think Jonathan Feltz, who's a political consultant, said very well, you still need a strong candidate with a Trump endorsement. It's not a guarantee.
Okay, we're going to talk more about that after the break, including Trump weighing into a state Senate primary of none other than the Senate leader, Phil Berger. We'll be right back.
AI is incredible. It can teach you how to fry an egg and even write a poem, pirate style. Yarr! But it knows nothing about your work. Slackbot is different. It doesn't just know the facts, it knows your schedule. It can turn a brainstorm into a brief, and it doesn't need to be taught. Because Slackbot isn't just another AI, it's AI that knows your work as well as you do. Visit slack.com/meet Slackbot to learn more.
You're listening to Under the Dome. I'm Capitol Bureau Chief Dawn Vaughan, here with DC correspondent Danielle Battaglia. Before the break, we were talking about candidate filing and the congressional races and the impact of a Donald Trump endorsement. Trump has already weighed into the North Carolina primary election this year. This past week, he endorsed Senate Leader Phil Berger, the Rockingham County longtime leader of the Senate as a Republican. Also, before Republicans took control, he's been in Raleigh at the General Assembly for a long time, and he's being challenged by his home county sheriff, Rockingham County Sheriff Page. Page is a contender in the sense that he has been elected by the voters several times, as Berger has, and that's a little bit different than some of these other races where other things can, have a bigger impact. So, Sheriff Page, I interviewed Sheriff Page last week about a couple of different things, including the fact that he is under investigation, at least one, by the State Bureau of Investigation. And that relates to this vending machine account at the sheriff's office. And he's getting some heavy scrutiny from the Rockingham County Board of Commissioners. And one of those commissioners is Kevin Berger, who is Phil Berger's son. And Kevin Berger was chair until the very first meeting of this month. If you know anything about county commissioners, they'll, reelect. They have a cycle of when they choose their chair on the board. So that's kind of the backdrop of some of this. Danielle is perfect to talk to about this also, because over, a decade ago, about 11 years ago, I think that's what Danielle said when she left. Danielle worked for the Reidsville Review, which is now Rockingham Now. And this was, again, when Sheriff Page was still a big figure in Rockingham County. Senate Leader Phil Berger is a big figure in Rockingham County. So I think it'll be interesting for our listeners to hear from you about how long, what their presence has been in local politics there, kind of what Rockingham is like. What's the political vibe there?
Well, it's interesting because I know the dynamic has shifted a little bit since I left 11 years ago. So I started covering Rockingham County in 2011. I believe that's the same year that the Senate leader was elected, maybe. I remember saying on another podcast that we came up together and thinking Berger probably does not agree with that. But so the dynamic with the two of them has always been very fascinating to watch. They are, like, I would say mortal enemies. That's probably a little strong, but the Berger family and Page's people, supporters, have never liked each other. I believe this goes back to when Phil Berger Jr. ran for district attorney. I believe Sam Page endorsed his opponent over him, and the Bergers have never let him forget that. Sam Page is also a very powerful figure in Rockingham County. He's very popular. That has waned a little bit in recent years with some of the investigations and things that have gone on in the sheriff's office, that favorability has gone down a little bit, but still like a very powerful force. I would say he's the biggest name in Rockingham County. He is on TV and radio all the time, getting his name out there. And I believe he's been sheriff for over 30 years. So this is, if somebody was going to try to take on Berger, this is the guy to do it.
Page and Berger, actually, it's about the same. I don't have my story pulled up in front of me, but I feel like Page was, it was all around 2000, where Page may be late 90s. And then Berger's been in the Senate for a long time, but he was in the Senate when Republicans were in the minority. So long timers here. As we're recording this, I'm sitting in the legislative building. Remember when he was the leader of the minority caucus instead of the majority. So it's a very different perspective. He's had this power, Senate leader for a long time. Of course, the way I was talking about chair of county commissioners, the chair of a county commissioners only gets that power from the other commissioners. Because they vote and decide who they want as chair in the General Assembly. In order to be Senate President pro tempore, which is his official title, you're chosen by the caucus. And the same way in the House, the Speaker is chosen by your caucus, and whoever the majority party is, that's who has the power. So we're seeing Page paint Berger as someone who's been here in Raleigh too long, that has gone, distant from his district. A lot of what you hear really in any campaign, sort of like, to contrast that with your coverage of the federal government, people say, oh, they're a DC insider versus DC outsider, that sort of thing. And people will use that, even as they also want to become the DC insider, right?
Yeah. Well, and I think that's an interesting dynamic you bring up too for people voting in this race. Is there's always been a air of Berger's not doing enough for this county. I think that's changed over the years since I left, but that was always like a talking point that his opponents would use against him. But voters are like, do we want to lose that kind of power in Raleigh? Because if Sam Page comes in and wins this election, he will not likely be Senate leader. It will go to somebody who's been there for a while. And so that's something that Rockingham has always had to navigate, is like, we've got somebody who can give us what we need. We've got the power. Do we want to lose that? Or do we want to elect somebody new and fresh? And that's something that Page will have to overcome. And, the county voters will have to think about as they go into this election.
And in Trump's endorsement of Senator Berger, he also praised Sheriff Page. He said that he definitely wants Berger, but also likes Page, said, hey, Page, you should come work up here and leave the race. And that night, Page said, nah, thanks for the compliment, President Trump, but I'm staying in. And again, this is as we're, recording this, midday Monday, North Carolina politics, things can change on a dime, but that's what it seems like now is that Page is not getting out. And at the state level, this has, really been the primary to watch. We are almost out of time. Before we get to headliner, Danielle, is there anything we've missed that people should think about with candidate filing this week, or anything to be on the lookout for?
I would also watch the Senate race very closely. You've got Senator Tom Tillis dropping out of the race. So you've got now Roy Cooper and Michael Whatley are the two biggest names. It will be a good race to watch, an interesting one, I think, well covered across the nation. So that's the only one I would probably highlight.
A lot of money going into that race too, and a lot of attention. All right, well, let's move on to our picks for headliner of the week. Danielle, what's your headliner?
This is fresh happening, so it's why it's top of mind for me. But Rob Reiner and his wife Michelle died overnight. His son's been arrested for his murder. But what was notable about it to me, more than anything else, is that there's been a lot of violence over the weekend. President Trump put out a statement on his death. And people were already upset with his reaction to some mass shootings that happened at Brown University and in Australia, saying things happen. They didn't like those words put together, like things happen, kind of downplaying a mass shooting. Now he's being criticized because he came out with a post kind of reveling in Rob Reiner's death and saying that he had Trump derangement syndrome, not system, and that, that basically he caused his own murder by being against Trump. And people are saying, even for the president, that is a low post to make. So that stands out to me right now. I think you have something more positive, though. Do you want to share?
We'll see if there's continued fallout. We usually try to end with go out on a lighter note for our headliners for the last one, and mine is about light. It's the Oakwood historic Oakwood candlelight tour. Although there's not actually any candlelight, but they keep calling it that, and it's during the day. Although it does go into the evening. So a friend of mine had asked me to go with her and some other friends several years ago. On the you get to tour the homes and Oakwood neighborhood. It's sort of that, like, on the edge of downtown behind the governor's mansion area, if you're not familiar with it. And it's really cool architecture, and it's a little bit of a quirky neighborhood too. So I was along for the ride, and it's become, a fun tradition. But also, I'll know, like, really the 2 blocks of the neighborhood closest to the state government complex area, and not much further in the neighborhood. So that's what I get to know when I'm traipsing around the streets there, with your little brochure and getting checked off at the different houses. There are more modern houses in that neighborhood. If I guess people have lived in Raleigh for, I don't know, I feel like it was maybe within the last decade. There's a lot of hubbub over a modern house being built in that area of town. And now there are multiple houses. So that was kind of interesting to see just the changes in the neighborhood over there. It was also the open house at the executive mansion. And I went to that. I just kind of was thinking, like, how does Governor Stein decorate for the holidays versus Governor Cooper? It's a lot of the same things, the tradition, certain pieces in the mansion. And of course, Stein is the first Jewish governor of North Carolina. I believe Cooper had a menorah, maybe just one. And I saw more, really interesting ones in the different rooms of the first floor of the mansion there, along with the holiday trees. And it's just it's a fun thing to do. And Stein, of course, other people call it the People's House, and it is, open to the public on occasion, so you can see what your tax money is funding, I guess, since it belongs to the state. So. All right, we are a minute past our usual time. I always say I'll try to cut it close, and then we don't, because I always love talking about the holidays with Danielle. So, and of course, politics. So, all right, thank you for listening. Next week, we're going to bring you our look at a year in review. So be sure to listen to that among your holiday travels. But that's it for this week. I'm Dawn Vaughan for Danielle Battaglia and producer Kevin Keister. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.
For more from our politics team, subscribe to the News and Observer at newsobserver.com/subscribe. Follow us on Twitter at Under the Dome and NC Insider, and sign up for our weekly political newsletter, also called Under the Dome, at newsobserver.com/newsletters. Thanks for listening.